Hey everybody, this is Javi, and this is the Inner Child Collective, where you and your inner child heal for the better. Welcome and hello. I hope everyone's doing all right. I hope everyone's getting ready for the holidays if y'all celebrate. Or if not, I do hope you're doing well nonetheless, right? With everything that's going on. So, for those who do not know me, I'm a psychic, intuitive medium, and author who specializes in inner child therapy. And the way I work is this. So, I place a strong emphasis on the historical and generational trauma we've experienced as children. I talk about the archetypes and the stories about ourselves that we've adopted and internalized as a result of the trauma that we've gone through. And I also really emphasize on the unconscious stories we tell ourselves and act out during our adulthood, and how we can actually rewrite those stories that really don't belong to us, um, through our healing process, and using our inner child to help us with that healing process. And so I wanted to, for one, before I even get started with everything that's going on, I wanted to apologize for having this episode get out so late, right? I've been going through a lot of spiritual stuff, and actually going through a lot of personal things. And so I'm just now getting it together in regards to my mood, and in regards to what's going on in my personal life. And my mental health is very important to me. So I just didn't want to be out here um putting out content knowing full well that I was not doing okay. And so um I'm better, and I am. We have a good episode here. I'm going to be talking about Elliot Page, and what it's like to be an older trans person, and how we have a whole history that people don't know about. We have a whole history that we are to talk about, right? Because we are out here, and I fit into that category as far as coming out later on in life. But that's not. We're going to be talking about that later on. Um, just want to go ahead and get through these announcements real quick though. So if you're a fan of the Inner Child Collective podcast, or you know you enjoy the content, please, please, please leave a review wherever you listen to it, right? Wherever you listen to it, because the more reviews I get, the more people will listen, because they will trust your word. And also, it's just another way for me to get the word out about healing, looking out for yourself, looking out for your inner child, connecting with your inner child, and how our intersections were used against us. Um, as a result of white supremacist ideologies around those intersections, and how those stories are not ours at all, and they're based on some ideology that we did not even come up with. You know what I mean? And when I say we, I'm talking about marginalized and colonized people, but also how white supremacy affects white folks as well, as children. And even though I talk about all kinds of things, right? All kinds of things regarding that, and people are to know um, why we don't like ourselves as children, and why we adopt a false self. So please leave a review, um, so people will know where I am. You know what I mean? And so I can continue to do this work. I will do it anyway, but it'll be cool to get a review and some thumbs up. Especially if you are watching me on YouTube. And also, if you have a question and would like to have it read on the air, be sure to send it to me by email. And the email is theinnerchildcollective@gmail.com. If you follow me on Instagram or Facebook, you can also post your question in the comments, when I post the Q&A logo. So be sure to look out for that. And you'll be anonymous. You will definitely be anonymous unless you say, I'm okay with it, right? But your name will not be mentioned unless otherwise specified. And be sure to follow, speaking of following, right? Be sure to follow the Inner Child Collective on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. I'm on Instagram more so than not. And you're more likely to get an answer from me if you follow me on Instagram. So be sure to do that. You'll also follow me, wherever you find the Inner Child Collective. So let's go ahead and get started with this episode. So here's the thing. Like before, and I should have put this in the announcements maybe. Um, but there's some of the changes that are going to be happening on the show to make it more authentic and to make it more personable. At least for me, I definitely will do this because I want to definitely connect to people who are on their healing journey, who is working with their inner child, who's not afraid to do their shadow work. And so, one major change I'm going to be doing is there's not going to be a PowerPoint, no more PowerPoints. It's just very I'm just gonna do bullet points from now on. It's just it's just pretty much the same, on my end because like I the only reason why I did those PowerPoints is because granted I wanted to include the deaf and hard of hearing and those who are visual learners. But I also felt like if I have a PowerPoint, then I can stay on task and my mind won't just go anywhere because it has a tendency to do that. So it was my own insecurity around not sounding a certain way, and that's where that shit came from. So it felt very scripted and very robotic because I'm just reading these PowerPoints. But I am learning to have more confidence in myself and in my brain, and as far as like you getting the information or me conveying the information in a way that's very accessible and as clear as it possibly can be, but also like it just seems more authentic, and we'll be able to like connect with one another because you're seeing my face and not a PowerPoint. So that's one thing. The Q&A session is another thing too. It's not going anywhere, but I do notice that a lot of people, I don't get a lot of questions, from people, at least not yet anyway. And so I found myself like looking for questions the majority of the time, and I'm like, no, I'm not doing that to myself, and I'm not putting people under pressure to like send me a question every 2 weeks. So y'all know what to do. Y'all, if y'all have a question, you can always send it to me. Otherwise, I can definitely fill out an hour's worth of a show. That's not the problem at all. So I just want to let y'all know that. And speaking of authenticity, um, one of the reasons why I got rid of the PowerPoints as well is because um, I felt like it did not give me the opportunity. It did not give me the opportunity to hold on, my phone is like, I hate what is, I'm gonna turn this off. That way I am not interrupted because I should have done this beforehand, but it is what it is. But um, another way for me to be authentic is to show you what my interests are, to talk about my interests in regards to, and I guess like make references to trauma and the inner child through these interests. And one interest I have is television. I love television. I love film. I love different aspects of pop culture that I didn't know that were pop culture. Because when I think of pop culture, I think like Cardi B and and Supernatural. I used to watch Supernatural back in the day, but I stopped doing that like some time ago. Um, for other reasons, but basically that's what I thought. Like I had a myopic view about in regards to like pop culture and what it looks like and what it would look like as far as my interests. But it turns out that I was following pop culture this entire time. Like I am a huge fan of Star Wars, Star Trek, or science fiction in general. I'm also a fan of shows like on Netflix, um, Umbrella Academy, Drunk History, and things of that nature. I love true crime for the most part, especially unsolved mysteries. And there's a story that I really want to talk about, in the near future because it definitely talks about trauma in the inner child and in childhood, in childhood as far as like older children and secrets, like massive secrets, right? So I love talking about those type of things. And so it's just another way for me to connect to the audience, but it's also another way for me to not take things so seriously to the point where it seems very academic and stuffy because I felt like it was going that route. And I also feel like it's relatable. If you make things relatable, it will stick. So that's what that's one thing I wanted to talk about. Like, I'm very excited about the pop culture references and the pop culture aspect of it, because like, yeah, there's like certain things that you don't know about me in particular, and this is another way for me to be vulnerable, I guess. So part of the pop culture phenomenon are certain actors who are in the public eye, and one of them just came out on December 1st. Their name is Elliot Page. You may know them, from Juno, Inception. You probably just, if you've seen Hard Candy, that's their first movie. They're also in the Umbrella Academy as Vanya Hargreaves, and they also played Kitty Pryde in a couple of the X-Men movies. But on December 1st, Elliot Page came out as trans and non-binary, and their pronouns are they, them, or he, his. And so, like, I really love them in general, because they are very much an icon in the LGBTIQA community in general, as an activist, an advocate, always using their platform to talk about to talk about what we go through, what our community goes through as we are marginalized, and in some cases, colonized people, who don't, have that platform or have the voice big enough to like talk about what's going on with us. So the fact that they are a white person, having these conversations, around LGBTIQA issues is phenomenal to me, and is very genuine as well. And so that's what I look for as well, as far as an ally or someone who is like using their platform to have these conversations, right? And so they wrote this when they first came out on December 1st. They wrote this beautiful post on social media. I don't know whether or not it's on Instagram or not, but it's on social media nonetheless. And so like they published it on variety.com. And so like I'll read a little bit of it here. It's beautiful. So it says, quote unquote, "Hi friends, I want to share with you that I am trans. My pronouns are he, they, and my name is Elliot. I feel lucky to be writing this, to be here, to have arrived at this place in my life. I feel overwhelming gratitude for the incredible people who have supported me along this journey. I can't begin to express how remarkable it feels to finally love who I am enough to pursue my authentic self. I've been endlessly inspired by so many in the trans community. Thank you for your courage, your generosity, and ceaselessly working to make this world a more inclusive and compassionate place. I will offer whatever support I can and continue to strive for a more loving and equal society." So, as I said before, and that's only the first paragraph. It's a lot longer than that. And towards the end, they talk about the injustices and the inequities that trans people go through, trans and non-binary people go through on a regular basis, especially on the federal level. Because I don't know if people remember this, but a lot of our rights were taken away, and like trans and non-binary people, our rights were taken away by the Trump administration, to the point where we're almost erased, if not erased, on the federal level. And so like the fact that they talk about that and use their platform to talk about such things, and I'm not surprised at all, considering that they directed a film um, about indigenous people and what's going on with them politically, especially when it comes to environmental protections and environmental politics and activism. So like they are really unlike, they're down for the cause, down on top of down on top of down, right? And so they're as far as like them being an advocate and activist, they're still, and what they were, like I said before, very much an advocate for the LGBTIQA community. And based on that post alone, I can tell that they've surrounded themselves with trans and non-binary people. They definitely have done that, and done a lot of soul searching by listening to the stories, having those knee-deep conversations, those like heartfelt grown folks conversations about who they are as a person and where they fit in, where they fit in regards to themselves, right? And so like this is one of the reasons. This is one of the reasons why it's so very important to have a healthy and vibrant LGBTIQA community in all over the world. Um, and in particular in certain areas where you really don't get support, you know, outside of that community, right? Like it's just having those resources and having access to those resources, regardless of who you are and regardless of your social economic status, is fucking vital, man. It's like it's so vital. um Again, what helps so many people, you know, who are struggling with their gender identity regardless of how old they are, right? And so the reason, and I bring up age, I think age is extremely important because what I found interesting about Elliot coming out is the fact that they came out as a 33-year-old. They are 33 as we are speaking right now, or as I'm speaking, um, and and that's what I want to focus on. That is what I want to focus on. Trans and non-binary people coming out and being themselves at a later age. There's a lot of us. There's a lot of um, older trans and non-binary people who have come out later on in life, um, because they felt safe to do so, and they have felt they could not live by, you know, they couldn't live this other life anymore. Even though it's best to honor that life, to honor who you were at that time, because that person kept you safe, and that's something that we're going to be talking about like later on. But when I am referring to older trans and non-binary people, I'm talking about those who are 30 and over, and also those who've established a life of their own before transitioning, meaning that they're not dependent or depending on their biological loved ones financially, emotionally, or you know, or yeah, basically they're not focusing on their loved ones or depending on their loved ones financially, um, or emotionally. And that point is very important, and it's something that I'll explain later. There's a reason why that is extremely important. So the reasons why I wanted to have this conversation, right, is because you really don't hear about trans and non-binary people coming out, you know, into their adulthood. You don't hear about those stories. It's often younger people that you talk about, or that you hear about, that we talk about, um, people who have known, like kids who have known who they were, um, especially this generation of kids who now have the resources. They have Google, they have the social media, they have YouTube, they have what a lot of us growing up did not have, right? Um, because I'm a kid of the 80s. I'm not going to sit here and trip. Like I'm an 80s kid, and a lot of that stuff was not available. That resources and the articles and the think pieces and the videos, we didn't have those resources, right? Um, and there's often, if not always, another reason I'm wanting to bring this up is because there's often like that focus on trans people, which is, and I'm going to be honest with you, that's understandable because they require support. They require support, like we all do, but they require support, um, especially with all the trauma the Trump administration has caused the trans and non-binary community. Like, caused a lot of trauma, which is something that we are to talk about. You know what I mean? That's something that we are going to talk about when the time comes. Because right now, people are like, "Oh my God, Joe Biden! Oh my God, Kamala Harris!" And we did it. We out here. You know what I mean? But at the same time, like we can't brush under the rug the amount of trauma the Trump administration has caused over the past 4 years. So those are the reasons. Like it's basically, in a nutshell, the two reasons why I'm doing this episode. You don't hear about trans and non-binary people, and also like the younger generation. You always hear about the younger generation of trans and non-binary people, usually through a coming out story. So they're like, even, and the reason why I'm like, another reason is that like there's an entire generation of older and non-binary folks who've lived as someone else for a huge chunk of their life. Um, and that's something I'm going to bring up in detail, but like we have a whole history. There's a whole history that we have. Older trans and non-binary people, um, we have a whole history, before transitioning. And so it's just awesome to hear those stories about how we were, and who we were, and the experiences that we've had in order for us to come out safely, or before we were able to do so. And I feel like that gives a lot of the younger generation hope, especially if there's like there's some folks who are 20 and younger, in their 20s and younger, excuse me, who feel like being older and being trans is not possible, right? Because the death rate among trans people is very high. At the same time, we do have a history, and there's a lot of us, myself included, who are very alive and very successful and very happy with who they were, with who they were and who they are now. So the reason why this happens, like as far as us having like this huge chunk of a history, before we come out, is because there's a negative stigma and lack of resources. So Sarah Elizabeth Adler of AARP.org wrote an article about, and I'll post that article, post a lot of those articles, um, in the descriptions, right? But basically, like, this is a really good article in regards to why so many LGBTIQA people don't come out until later on in life. And so one reason is negative stigma. We just hear a lot of negativity around being trans and being non-binary, and so there is this, because of that lack of support, whether it be from family members or friends or community members, um, or overall society. We were like, no. And then on top of that, we have this negative media. So it's just like, no, we're not, we just go knee deep into the closet and stay there sometimes. And also there's like a lack of resources. There are many older trans and non-binary people who weren't aware of their history or existence, right? Or the history of, I can't speak right now. um, there's a lot of us who didn't even know what a trans person looked like, or that trans people existed, until the internet. When chat rooms were pretty much a thing, right? We had AOL, back in those days. A lot of people, a lot of trans and non-binary people counted on, chat rooms from Yahoo, AOL, and others that they most likely created themselves, um, to connect and create community with other trans and non-binary people and do so safely. And when social media became available, when Facebook blew up, when TikTok blew up, and YouTube and all these other social media sites blew up, there was even more of a resource to pull from. And so it wasn't until later on when, that people began to have all these resources. But before then, um, there really wasn't, before computers though, there really wasn't much support or resources, right? And then you have the inability to explore and articulate your feelings until later on in life. A lot of trans and non-binary people did not feel safe and did not have the vocabulary, and did not have because of the lack of resources, they didn't have the vocabulary in the room, right, to negate their emotions and to um, explore their feelings around who they were and who they are. They didn't have the room to like explore their confusion and to question their confusion as to what was going on and why they felt so different. And this is actually regarding to gender identity. A lot of the people who have who knew who they were, at a very young age, but didn't know what that was because they didn't know what a trans person looked like. It was like the lack of representation. Um, this is actually like, it's even compounded, right, when you have gone through trauma. Because in addition to not being able to tell anybody about these feelings, you're a child, you're 4 years old, 5 years old, 7 year old, 8 year old, and you have all these feelings, right? And you have all these questions about who you are, and you are pretty much shut down by a toxic family member or a church member or somebody who is like constantly like showing like just basically showing and telling you in so many ways that you don't matter, your feelings don't matter, you as a being, a human being doesn't matter, and you just shut down. You definitely shut down. A lot of us have gone through that. um so like this, as I said before, like it just wasn't safe. Those who have gone through trauma, who are trans and non-binary, um, who don't have the support in their home, they end up shutting down, or they end up not feeling as if they do not matter, or they feel scared because you have family members, poking fun at trans and non-binary people, or poking fun at gay and lesbian people, or saying that they have some sort of mental illness or whatnot. What do you do with that? Right? What do you do with that? And on top of that, like a lot of us have grown up in strict homes, religious homes, right? Where even religion was used as a weapon against trans and non-binary people, gay and lesbian folks in general, but like um, anybody in the LGBTIQA community, but trans and non-binary people we've also have gone through those growing pains where you've gone to church, and you hear those sermons about people who are different, people um, who are not attracted or wanting to be with, someone of the opposite sex, and or people who want to be a quote unquote another gender. Somehow that is like part of that's part of the world, right? And I noticed that like even in the black community is often the church, right, that a lot of people gravitate towards in regards to solace and faith and finding out and reconnecting with God to find out who they are. And the flip side of that is a lot of transphobia, that a lot of us older trans people and non-binary people have gone through, from through while being in the black community or growing up in the black church, right? Even to this day, there's a lot of us who are dealing with transphobia and homophobia because, according to the black community, the black church community, this is something that is unnatural. Being LGBTIQA, being trans and non-binary is very unnatural. So we're hearing all these messages, especially when we're children, we're hearing all these messages about people who are like us. And on top of that, you are getting this message that somehow, depending on your political ideologies, that somehow this is what white people do. This is what white people go through, not black people. Do you know what I mean? So you also hear those messages over time. You know what I mean? Like, you have like in regards to like the inner child, our inner child, how we grew up as children, in these strict households, these unaffirming, non-affirming households, we're not seen as children with thoughts and ideals and ideologies and ideals and dreams and hopes and emotions. We are there to be manipulated, humiliated, and to be controlled. Our emotions are controlled. Our ideologies are controlled. Our thoughts are controlled because our parents or our caregiver, um, they have this myopic, they have an idea of how they want you to be, which is why a lot of us end up adopting this false self, right? False self. FALSE, false. And the reason why I'm spelling it is because sometimes my words slur. So I want y'all to understand what I'm saying. But basically, like, we end up adopting this false image of ourselves in order to be safe, in order to be accepted. So as a result, a lot of us end up being in the staying in the closet and just burying our true self. We end up burying our true selves. Not only are we burying our personalities and our ideas and our emotions, everything that makes us who we are, and connect us to the world and connect us to spirit, we're also burying our gender identity. So twice over, we are hiding ourselves and burying ourselves and hiding behind this false self. And so we're doing it two times over. So we really do, and we do this because we believe, like, as children, we believe that the false self will guarantee our safety within the toxic environment. We also believe that the false self will guarantee unconditional love and acceptance from those we love and depend on, whether it be our families or our church community or our school community or our society or group of friends. Like, we truly believe that by creating this false false persona, that we end up that sooner or later we would get unconditional love and acceptance. We really do believe that, unfortunately. And the payoff that we receive, as a result of, connecting to this false self and internalizing this false self, we may or may not get the love that we are seeking. But that's not conditional love, or unconditional love. That's not unconditional love at all. It's just our parents responding to their idea of us because it makes them comfortable. And so a lot of us end up staying in the closet for years. And on top of that, we will risk our mental and emotional health in order to keep up this archetypes, a lot of the archetypes that we have adopted as a result of holding on to this false self. Because in addition to adopting and internalizing the false self, that false self is based on other people's ideas of us. Could you imagine like living in the 50s or the 40s or the 60s, like a lot of us have had to do, or a lot of us did rather? And because of the political climate, in addition to your upbringing, you did not feel safe at all coming out. So you adopted this false self because, due to the lack of resources and due to the lack of support, you don't know any better. And on top of that, you are getting a payoff to a certain extent. And it's very traumatic because the people who you count on the most don't even love you for who you are. They love this idea of you. I've read this book, and there's a really cool book. It's called here it is. The Drama of Being a Child by Alice Miller. And she talks about the false self significantly, and how a lot of us don't even feel our emotions or even know who we are until we go into therapy or we get professional help. And we realize that a lot of our anger and a lot of our true self and the personality of the true self, um, there's like is all that stuff comes up to the surface, and there's like the sense of anger, sadness, grief, but there's a sense of relief. And that's what it's like for a lot of folks who have not only gone through trauma, but are coming out of the closet at an older age, where even though they are risking the loss of family or risking the loss of a job, they rather go through that knowing full well that for the most part, they know who they are, being who they are. She doesn't talk about trans people in particular, um, but there's a lot of stories in there about, you know, when you come out as your true self. There are a lot of stories. There's a beautiful article um, that I have um, that I have read. Sorry, I'm like, ooh, that I've read. And it's like the article itself is a BuzzFeed article, and it's basically like about this portrait book, this table book, featuring older trans people, and they tell their stories. And I forgot exactly what the book was called. I apologize, and I'll put it in the comments when I find it again. But it's in my notes somewhere. I don't know where my notes are, but basically, like I think it's called "To Live on This Shore," and it's just the pictures alone are very powerful and very beautiful. And these particular individuals talk about their experiences as older trans and non-binary people. It's called "To Live on This Shore," and I'll definitely put the link in the descriptions. But basically, like, these people are a couple of people talked about how they used drugs, or um, they self-medicated. There was another article I've read of, featuring older trans people, non-binary people who struggled with alcoholism and struggled with self-harm, because they were not able to be their authentic selves, thinking that they're going to be losing so much stuff, losing so much, losing their job, or losing entire support systems. Um, and because they were afraid to go that route, and to lose those what they consider resources, and then lose that support, um, they continue to live this false self to the point of creating a family of their own, getting married and having children, and creating this entire life based on this false self, and what the false self was giving them, and that is like acceptance and safety. In fact, like, that's the foundation of the false self, that desire to have um, acceptance and unconditional love and safety, right? And so, like, there are so many like trans people who are in the closet, so deep in the closet that they forget. Sometimes they forget about their true self, because they're that deep into the closet. But what people do not know, or maybe not understand, is that, like, sooner or later, that true self, right, is going to want to emerge in some way, shape, or form. Something or someone is going to remind you, of who you really are. It tends to happen more often than not. So, like, and there's another thing too. Because of the lack of resources, a lot of older trans and non-binary people really don't believe that they're trans, because the trans community, unfortunately, is so binary. There are a lot of folks who want to pass, so passing privilege is very much a thing. That's also based on white supremacist ideologies around beauty in what a man or a woman is supposed to be like. There's no in between. And so like there's a lot of people who believe, there are a lot of people who question whether or not they are trans, because in addition to not having resources, a lot of resources now, we have those resources now in regards to like non-binary individuals, gender nonconforming individuals, because they're out there. Elliot Page is one of them, but there are, for the most part, the trans community is very binary, and so you have to dig deep in order to like, find some really good resources that center non-binary people. And so like, I know that I fell into that category as well, as far as questioning my trans identity, and I'm being led to talk about a little bit about the true scum and transmed people. They cause further confusion um, around the binary, and they have the tendency to gatekeep, who's trans, and they are self-appointed, um, gatekeepers of the trans community. And so like, um that causes further confusion when you have someone who is a transmed or a true scum person saying like, because you're not dysphoric, or because you're not taking hormones, or because you're not trying to get all these gender affirming surgeries, um, or you're non-binary, you are not trans. And that's not the case. That's not true at all. Trans people come in all shapes and sizes. We're everywhere. You know what I mean? Like, just because someone is non-binary does not mean that they cannot be trans. I'm basically like living proof of that. And I just wanted to tell the folks who are listening to this, especially if you're older and you're a trans person, um, or a non-binary person listening to this, please know that you do not have to be uncomfortable in your body, or uncomfortable with your body, or be on hormones in order to be trans. Let's not. You're perfect as you are, and your journey is your journey. Okay, it's no one's business unless you make it someone's business. But your journey is your own, and I just wanted to say that to those who are just coming out, and because there's a lot of misinformation out there in regards to who's trans and who's not, and like the transmed the transmed and the true scum community has the tendency to like cause a lot of confusion. And so I just wanted to like point that out, like your journey is your own, and you do not have to go through surgeries or take hormones, or even change your name in order to be trans. Okay, just wanted to put that out there. So like I said before, I am in the latter category as far as like questioning my trans identity, because I knew that I wasn't binary. Um, and I want to say the first and last point, as far as like hiding your gender identity in your real personality, your true self, and also like denying your feelings and stuffing your feelings down because you feel like you're not trans enough. So I fall into those two categories. And so for those who don't know me, right, because I have a story for y'all. For those who don't know me, I am agender transmasculine, and my pronouns are they, them, or he, his. And so like many other trans people and non-binary people, I knew who I was at a very young age. I noticed that, in the articles that I've read, a lot of people knew who they were like long ago, like when they were like pretty much zygotes, you know what I mean? But all joking aside, like a lot of people knew, who they were at 4 or 5. And so I was in that category. I pretty much knew that I was different by the age of 5, and I didn't know what that was. I just lived my life. I knew um, that I didn't feel like a girl, but I didn't feel like a boy either. And so like I remember trying to pee like a boy in my grandmother's house at one point, and felt very comfortable doing that, even though it didn't work out the way I did. It definitely didn't work out. But I felt comfortable doing that. And so like at the same time, I just felt like I didn't put too much thought into it because again, I didn't have the vocabulary and I lived in a strict household. So my parents would not have that conversation with me anyhow. So I just know that it came out in so many different ways as far as my gender identity. Like it came out in the interests that I had. So like I loved Gem and the holograms. Like I'm a kid of the 80s. So there were some cartoons that you may not have heard of unless you were born in the 80s or you're just into vintage shit. But basically like I used to love the Smurfs, Gem and the holograms, but I will also watch G.I. Joe, WWF when they had a cartoon. And I used to watch Cops and Crooks. I love Lady Jane of G.I. Joe because she was butch, and I just wanted to be as strong as He-Man. I loved like the whole concept of being physically strong. I was really into that, and so like, um, what complicated matters though, in addition to me like kind of questioning like, I guess like in addition to being different and feeling different, what complicated matters is that I was also molested at 5. I was being molested by my aunt, my mother's sister, at around the same time. And so she exposed us and me. She exposed me and other children to porn. And so like she was around 10 or 11 at that time, and she exposed herself to us kids as well as we grew older. And so like I learned about women's bodies through that experience, and I also realized that I was attracted to girls at that time. And so like that caused a lot more confusion. And there were times when I thought maybe like I am this way because of what happened to me. I am this way because I sometimes I sometimes wanted to be with girls primarily. In the 3rd grade it was like that. um but I also knew that um I was interested in boys or anyone who was nice to me as well. um, there were times when I wanted to dress as a boy. I wanted to look like a boy. I wanted to act like a boy. I was very comfortable with my masculine energy. I didn't like the fact that I developed breast. I didn't like the fact that, that I was sexualized because of them. I just wanted them to go away at some points. And I just wanted to be flat chested. I just remember wanting to be flat chested. I wasn't uncomfortable with my body. I was uncomfortable with the fact that parts of my body were sexualized. And so I didn't like dresses, but I loved jeans and sneakers. And I remember in the 6th grade, I bought my first pair of Converse sneakers, and I'm like, I feel like a boy every time I wear these. And so, like, I've just felt so comfortable um, imagining myself as masculine. Not exactly imagining myself as a boy, but imagining myself as masculine. I loved my masculine energy, and I felt very comfortable in that energy. But I could never express those feelings or question my gender because it just wasn't safe. I lived in a strict Christian home. My mother was my primary caregiver, and there were just way too many times where we used to go to church too. Like she used to force us to go to church. And so there were way too many times where she declared her dislike, severe and like sour dislike, of the LGBTIQA community, gays and lesbians in particular. And I just remember her threatening me at one point, um, telling me that for whatever reason, I don't know, I guess we were shopping or whatnot, and she said, I will beat it out of you. You're not a boy, and I will beat it out of you if I have to. And so, like, it was just, she was just extremely abusive in every way, shape, or form anyway. So I just never felt safe um, expressing my true self. And so, like, I developed this false self, um, around wanting to be safe and wanting to be accepted and wanting to be unconditionally loved. Because throughout my entire childhood, I was bullied. I would get into fights. People were trying to fight me. I was called ugly. I went through a lot of stuff. Like the 6th grade was actually the worst because of the bullying. And so, like, the only time I ever heard about trans people anyway is when they were on television, and the representation was just not positive at all. So, and then this Reaganomics and all kinds of stuff, right? That was going on. So fast forward to 2017 when I'm in the crux of my false self, right? I'm living in Rochester, New York at this point, and there's this coffee shop here called Equal Grounds, and it's like the only LGBTIQA coffee shop in New York State, or at least in Rochester anyway. And so every Thursday at 7:30, there was this social group called the Genesee Valley Gender Variance, or GV Squared, as is known to other folks here. And that's where I met my friend Cole. And Cole is a trans man, he's like probably in his 20s right now. And he and I met at GV Squared, and we bonded over our pets. So he has a dog named Dez. He has two dogs now, and also I have had a cat named Tobias McCoy. That people, like everyone knows about Tobias. You know, people who know me know Tobias, right? Um, he was basically the love of my life. So one night we were talking outside of Equal Grounds, you know, during the meeting. And we were talking about our individual pets and how much we love our pets. And I was like, look, I love Tobias, and like people would die screaming if someone tried to hurt him. Like, he's the love of my life. He is my cat son. Like, y'all can try it if you want to, and it would not go well. Right. That's how much I love my cat. And so like, all kinds of protective parent shit that I was saying. And so like I was talking, and Kyle said, or not Kyle, but Cole said, um, you're a crazy cat guy. And so I paused when he said that. And I looked at him. I'm like, can you say that one more time? Because I thought I was hearing shit at first. And he was like, you're a crazy cat guy. And when he said it again, like, it hit different. I remember it hitting so different. And I didn't know why at the time. It just felt natural. And it felt confirming and affirming. Because remember, I have been knee deep in the closet. But there were times when I wanted to have I questioned why I didn't have a male name, and actually thought about having a male name at some point. But I didn't think very much of it because I was like, maybe I'm not trans, maybe I'm not all any of that. But it's just like when we had that conversation, it just hit different. And when I was like thinking about it, as I thought about it over the years, I realized that it felt like that because like it was just very real and very accurate. And it made sense. It definitely made sense. And it felt like as if he sensed something about me that I was not paying attention to very much, or trying to push away, because the false self is very powerful. You know, the false self was very powerful. I knew I didn't. I knew I was still different. Um, but I couldn't put my finger on it after a while. Like, I only had like this assumption about myself, and there were just way too many times now that I think about it where who I was supposed to be, who I am now, peaked out um, in some places throughout my life over time. And so I went home that night after that meeting, and I thought about what Cole said and what he called me. And it just made sense because there were, like I said, there were times when I wanted a more masculine name. There were more times when I have seen myself as masculine. There was a time when I wanted to be taller. There was a time when I asked my father if I could wear men's underwear, because I saw some underwear that were really nice, and it just felt like that's something I was supposed to be doing, right? And wearing. Um, I wanted to be considered strong. I wanted to I wanted to wear men's clothing. Wanted to wear my hair short. My hair was short, but I let it grow out at some points. I'm like, why can't it be any shorter than this, right? Um, I paid attention to the way I acted when I wore men's clothes. I just felt very natural. Even there was a time when I was like 183 pounds, believe it or not, but I noticed that felt more comfortable in my body at that time, because I was androgynous, and like I felt like people could not tell the difference, between when they looked at me, they couldn't tell the difference. And I felt very comfortable with that. And so like it just dawned on me that that was the reason why I just felt over the years very depressed and very empty and suicidal and anxious, often feeling as if I had to be in a relationship, or be pretty all the time. Was devastated when people called me ugly or didn't find me attractive at all, like stuff like that. I was very trying very hard to be female, and very cis female at that. I was just trying way too hard because I'm thinking this is what I'm supposed to be doing in order to survive. Um, and It's as if like that night, that summer night at Equal Grounds, like made everything make sense. And so like I talked to my therapist about it, and after that whole meeting of what happened and how comfortable I was, and it talked about my whole history in regards to like my gender identity, and the experiences that I've had throughout my life. We both have come to the conclusion that I was trans. Um, and we just from there we just got the ball rolling in regards to me coming out. It's been like 2-3 years now. I came out to my parents first. Then I came out on Facebook. I chose my name at this point, Louis Javier Mason. Went through the process of getting my name changed. Started hormones in 2018. Um, it got top surgery, um, in November of that year. And I can't even tell you how many my and I was 37 at the time I came out. I was 37. And I had to realize like it took a lot of soul searching on my end, because there was a time when I just wanted to push my old self away. And there was a time when I did not want to be around her. I didn't want to think about her because I was a whole different person, and a totally different person. And so like it took me a while, and took a lot of shadow work and some soul searching and some guidance from my spiritual advisor, and guidance from spirit, to learn that she didn't do anything wrong. She was surviving, and she has a whole history. The person I was has a whole history, and that history is not to be denied at all. Because if it weren't for her, Javi, would not be here. I would not be here. I would not be here. And so, like, I don't think, and a lot of people feel that before I even like stop talking, and move on. I want to also point out that the transitioning and going through that process isn't always easy. It's not. You are to navigate your own emotions, um, around who you are. There's the possibility of losing support. There's a possibility of you're constantly finding out like where you stand in regards to your transness and your identity, and how you're going to present yourself. If you're non-binary, really don't, and this is for the folks who have gone through some sort of trauma, or have a trauma history. Your false self you're navigating through that. You're dismantling that part of yourself and finding your true self. And so because you're like in the throes of that healing and going through that journey as well, um, you're on shaky ground as far as your confidence and um, who you are really, like for real. Like in addition, yeah, you are trans, um, but as far as like who you are beyond that, and you, especially if you're a people pleaser, you're gonna have people try it. You're gonna have people try to tell you who you are and where you fit in. Um, at least that's been my experience. And if you are not confident in yourself anyhow, and you are one of those people um, who've been a false self for so long, um, you're susceptible to um, what is being said to you. You're susceptible to, in regards to internalizing a lot of those messages or a lot of what they're telling you. So it's like, it's just not easy, especially if you are a person who have a trans and non-binary person, older trans and non-binary person who has not only done, transition, but you're also transitioning in the sense that you're breaking generational and historical trauma ties by getting rid of and dismantling your false self and becoming your authentic self. Um, not only as a trans person, but as a survivor, you are dismantling a lot of those stories around your identity and around who you are at the core. So it's very difficult because you are navigating who you are in so many ways. Um, at the same time, like I'm very grateful for coming out. I'm very grateful because I have gained so many friendships, like actual friendships. As I go through my own healing journey, I know who I am now. I know what I'm capable of now. Um, I am no longer obligated to be around people who do not see my authentic self and my true self. They just wanted to have some version of me that they can manipulate and control. Um, I'm now on this spiritual journey of finding out where, like basically, like finding out what my power is and how powerful it is. I'm able to have this conversation with y'all, as a result of my growth and as a result of coming out. In my head, I'm tall. In my head, my spirit is tall. In my head, like not even my head, but my whole being um, radiates strength and courage, perseverance, and authenticity and conviction. And that's all because I have given myself the opportunity and the permission to be my authentic self at 37. So it's all because of that one conversation I had with my friend Cole. I don't even think he realizes how grateful I am for that conversation. It literally, he and the fact that I was open enough to um, to the possibility of coming out saved my life. And so it's just neat, and that's the thing. That's why I feel like support is so important. It's so important. So, yeah, older trans people are out here. We are out here, and it's okay um, to be who you are at any age. It's never too late. It's not too late at all. And you're more likely risking a lot of your comfort and that stability. But it's so well worth it if it means um, you are going to be your authentic self. The support will come. The support is going to be here. And you're going to be supported by people who are meant to support you. If you are, and I'm saying this, if you are not comfortable being out yet, but you know who you are seen. I see you and I love you regardless. Because there are people who know who they are, but they feel more comfortable or they feel like they're in their greatest interest to like present as their former self around family members in the community and whatnot. And I'm telling you that I see you too. You are who you are, regardless of what you look like on the outside. So I see you and I love you regardless. I love you and I'm here for you. But just know that at any age, it's possible for you to come out. It's possible for you to be yourself. And there are older trans and non-binary people who are living their life. And that's something we're going to be talking about pretty soon. But I am going to take a break. I feel like I have spoken, you know, um, enough about, this. And so I'm definitely going to take a break. So please keep listening because I'll be talking about how you can show support for older and trans non-binary people and how you can support yourself emotionally and spiritually as an older and non-binary person, and how we older trans and non-binary people can honor honor our inner child, and also like honor the former self. So stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. Hey everyone, and welcome back. This is Javi of the Inner Child Collective. So, for the first part of the show, we talked about Elliot Page and him coming out, and how we talked about his coming out story, his experiences, and the experiences of older trans and non-binary people, because we're out here, right? And like I said before, you can come out at any age, right? And so, like, when you are, I always talk about support. I talk about support and things of that nature. You know what? Before I even like get started, please, please, please. I meant to say no shameless plug while I'm, please, 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 leave a review. Follow me on, wherever you listen to the podcast. Please follow or follow the podcast. Please leave a review. So I would like to know what you think. You can also follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok. So these are things that I talk about, at least on Instagram anyway. So by all means, like, just hit me up. Or if you have any questions, by all means, you can email me, theinnerchildcollective@gmail.com. And I'll definitely, all the resources that I talked about, all the books and the articles I've talked about, I'll be posting them, in the description. So I just wanted to say that before I moved on. So let's go back to the support of older trans and non-binary people. It's very important to have support. It's very important to have resources when you are an older trans and non-binary person, because things change. The resources change. And especially if you have come from an area where you are the only trans person, in your area, or there aren't a lot of resources, or you don't have access to a computer or whatnot. At least especially in the midst of COVID, it's just best to do everything and anything you can to like get support, right? Because when you're deciding to be your authentic self and you're coming out of the closet, and whether it be socially or medically or physically, it's very important to have as much support as you possibly can, especially if you're an older trans person and non-binary person. So with that in mind, when we have support, we have the resources or access to those resources and support systems, is also very important to have patience and compassion when you're going through this process of coming out at an older age, especially if you are um, a childhood abuse survivor. And the reason why this is, and I'm gonna tell you right now, like, we older trans people, especially those who are choosing to take hormones, we experience second puberty, right? At this point, like, and there's a lot of things that go on physically, emotionally, and even spiritually physically when you are going through second puberty, especially if you are taking hormones or you decide to take hormones. So on one hand, there you get the second chance of living the teenage experience that you've never experienced, when you were growing up the first time, because you were living in a traumatic household, or you're living in a toxic household, and um, you were not met with support around your changing hormones, your developing brain, your emotional, well-being. So, and I talk about this on another um, episode of the podcast, where the teenage brain is like a computer that is being rebooted. Okay, like there's some things are being thrown out, some things are being put in, and that is disrupted um, and switched around when trauma comes into the picture. When a child or a teenager goes through trauma, you know what I mean, their brain access their hormones and their synapses and their neurotransmitters start to shift, and they start to rewire themselves to protect the teen from further harm. And so that's what happens when you're going through your teenage experiences the first time, and as a result of that, you are developmentally arrested, meaning that you are the same age developmentally as you were when the trauma actually happened, regardless of the degree of the trauma and how it was introduced to the teen, right? And so, like, on one hand, you are given the second chance to be a teenager again, and being a teenager in a way that is authentic to you, that is healthy for you, right? Um, and it's just a way to rediscover and reconnect with that teenager, that inner teen in you, so you can work together and do shadow work around um, what y'all went through, or see a counselor over what you went through, and start to use this opportunity to heal by doing things that you wanted to do when you were a teen the first time, right? It's just another way for us to grow up and to be the person we wish we were growing up, right? On the other hand, like, we're expected to show up and act as an adult, especially when we're around other adults. You know what I mean? And we can't throw tantrums. We can't. Um, we can't put our lives on hold. We can't get an attitude, because let's be real, like, a lot of teens act the way they do because their brains are developing. And remember, because of the trauma you may have gone through as a teen, not only are you going through second puberty, you're developmentally a teenage kid. So there's a lot of things that you are expected to do as an adult, because even though you're chronologically 30, 40, 50 plus years old, you're developmentally 13, 14, 15, 12. You know what I mean? And this happens with um, a lot of survivors of childhood abuse, childhood trauma. And so there's like two different versions of our false self when we are going through this process. And you're dismantling two different parts of yourself. That, as far as a false self, when I talked about this before, you are dealing with, like, you are going and navigating through, like, the false self regarding your gender identity, and then you're navigating and dismantling the false self regarding who you are, like, at the core, as far as your personality, your ideas, and stuff like that. So it's like, in addition to being in the closet, like, you're also burying your true personality, in a sense. So it's just like, all that stuff that comes out when you're going through second puberty. That's why it's so important to have support. That's why it's so important to have compassion and patience for yourself, because if you are just now realizing that as a teen you went through all this shit, and now you're about to go through it again and then some as an adult, you're like, for real, like, if you have a family of your own, or you are around other adults, or you have all these responsibilities as an adult, that stuff may be like interrupted. You may go through, hormonal changes. You may eat, out eat things on house and home, or you may like become more sexual, or you may not be sexual at all, or you may see the world as a teenager more so than you probably already do. You may have certain emotions that are now coming up. Like that's what happened. That's what's real when you're going through second puberty. If you are taking, I mean, when you're taking hormones, especially. So it's just that's why it's so important, so very important to have a support system, a healthy support system who will have patience with you and will understand where you're coming from. This is not the. Let me put this out here too. This is not an excuse to treat people with disrespect and disregard. Second puberty is not the excuse for that, which is why it's so important for you to do your shadow work and to be in counseling. If so, if or talk to um, a spiritual advisor if you have spiritual beliefs. Talk to those folks and make sure they are trauma informed and trans affirming, or have some sort of knowledge around trans and gender nonconforming lives, and because what because it's real, right? That's why it's so important to have those support systems set in place, so you are not acting a fucking fool out here. When you're on when you are going through second puberty. Okay, you're not treating people with disrespect and disregard. And so, like, for real, like, surround yourself with people who are doing a significant amount of shadow work and trauma work on their own, or people who are at least learned in those things, because like second puberty is not a joke, especially if you are going through trauma or have gone through trauma during your first experiences as a teen and you have not worked on that. Okay, so this like the another reason why like a healthy support system is um in the LGBTIQ community is important, because they'll point you to the right resources, the adequate resources to understand yourself. Because one of the reasons why you may be going through second puberty and you're having all these um, emotions and don't know what to do with them, because they are indeed overwhelming. You are changing, your body is changing, your hormones are changing. And on top of that, developmentally, if you have not done the work, um, the shadow work necessary, the inner child work necessary, or the inner teen work necessary to navigate through all this, in a way that is affirming and healthy and compassionate, right? Um, you could be dealing with a lot of stuff, right? Um, there's a lot of us who deal with internalized transphobia because y'all been in the closet for so long. A lot of us have been in the closet for so long that, and you're on top of that, like you don't know any sort of resources or have not had any sort of positive representation around being trans, like, or about trans and non and gender nonconforming people. You may be dealing with a lot of internalized transphobia. And so it's just best to have those resources available so you will learn more about yourself and to love yourself. And on top of that, that's why shadow work is so important, because then you can get to the bottom of your transphobia. Where is it coming from? Who put it in your mind? Who, that being trans was, who or what put it in your mind that trans people are not to be revered? What stories did you internalize about being trans as a result? Transphobia, like internalized transphobia, happens. Yeah, when you just like when you're around people, when you're around people who just, and you're in a society where you're just not you're not affirmed. You're not affirmed, and they internalized, regardless of what color they are. They've internalized a lot of white supremacist ideologies around gender and around gender roles, and what, and this European standard of a man or a woman. You know what I mean? So it's just a lot of misinformation has stemmed from, these ideologies. And so it's something that we have to do shadow work around, especially if we are, struggling with internalized transphobia. So another reason why they have like a supportive system, a supportive a system when you're coming out and going through second puberty and going through all these changes and emotions at an adult age, especially if you are older, right? Is that you'll understand your confusion around the changes you're going through and you're choosing to make for yourself. And then like they'll recognize and help you recognize and reconnect with your true self. It's very important to connect with your true self, both as a survivor and a trans and or non-binary person, struggling with second puberty. You know what I mean? Like, again, you are going through two different types of changes right now. Um, all and both of them are dealing with you finding your true self and being comfortable in your true self and dismantling the false self that is based on these assumptions that you are to be somebody else to make everyone else around you comfortable. Right? So here are my words of wisdom, in regards to like um being older older trans and non-binary person and working through trauma. And so, for one, first and foremost, be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself. Show gratitude for the history of the person you once were. For real, like be kind to yourself. Have patience with yourself. Compassion for yourself, because this shit's hard, especially if you're an older trans and non-binary person um, who has a family of their own, um, who is worried about employment, and um, you don't have any support around you as of yet, and you feel like you are, because you're making the choice of being your authentic self, somehow you are doing wrong or you're being selfish. That's not the case at all. So please be kind to yourself. Also, again, show gratitude for the history of the person you once were. Without that person, you know what I mean? Um, without the person, you cannot fully grow. Um, because especially if you're denying that history, that person is to be honored, because without them, you wouldn't be here, right? And so I want people to understand that. And that's another thing too. Like when you are transitioning and becoming your authentic self, you do become someone else entirely. Like energetically, you become someone else entirely. Physically, you may become someone else entirely. Socially, you become someone else entirely. Like you become yourself. And it's like you are totally two different people. And so like um, that person become like they're part of your subconscious and your unconscious mind, just like your inner child is. And they are to be acknowledged, because if they're not, they're going to come and disrupt your life in some way, shape, or form, especially if that person, that part of you that had a history before you transition, went through significant amounts of trauma. They cannot heal. If they're not healing, you're not going to be able to move on. And I'm saying that from, telling you that from personal experience. Just because you transition does not mean that that part of your history is pretty much over with as far as the trauma. There is some growing that has to be done. Because when that history is not acknowledged and that person feels like that former self feels abandoned, they are going to show up in your life in some way, shape, or form, and sometimes it's not going to be a good thing. So please show gratitude for the person you once were. Honor them by speaking to them, having pictures of that person around, talking to that person, doing the shadow work around their stuff, around the trauma they went through, because the two of you share the same mind. They have stories of their own that they want to tell the world. So let them. All right. And so also, like, again, do your shadow work. Do your shadow work and show gratitude. And this is an important thing too. And I wish I have learned that for myself, and I know now. Do not allow cis people to tell you who you are and how you're supposed to present yourself. Because I had some folks like in the spiritual community and a couple of people in the Rochester community try to tell me who I was. And me, like, still not knowing to dismantle my false self, the people pleaser who was very quick to believe anything negative towards me or anything out of pocket towards me, to believe any story, that um, that tells me that I am not, I'm there's something wrong with me. I was very quick to like internalize a lot of that stuff. You are very vulnerable when you're coming out. And cis people who don't know about trans lives, trans people who don't know who don't know you very well, or who you, the trans person, your authentic self, they don't know you that well. They're not. They'll put their own ideas, even though their hearts may be in the right place, or they think their hearts are in the right place. They will put it out there. That you are this person, not this person. I don't see this, but this. Do not allow them to do that. You're not their business. You're not their business. You're none of their business unless you make it their business. But it's up to you in regards to how you want to present yourself, your authentic self. And also the last point is that you please know that you can create your own family. If biological family members refuse to accept the truth and refuse to accept your authentic self, you have the power to create a family of your own. That's what I had to learn. And that's why I continue to learn. Because when I first came out, here I am trying to convince my parents to accept who I was, accept who I am. And in their own individual way, they just refuse to do that. And so I'm like, no, I was strong enough in my own healing to say, like, look, I deserve better than this. I deserve better than this. And so I don't talk to them. I don't talk to them. I don't have to have a relationship with them. And I know I don't have to have a relationship with them because I deserve better. And as I've gone through my own spiritual journey, I also figured out and learned for myself that they didn't accept me before I transitioned. So who am I to even assume that they were going to accept me as I am authentically? So I didn't have any support from them anyway. I wasn't losing very much of anything. There's a lot of trans people out here, especially older trans people, who are afraid of losing their family members. But what we are to understand is that even at any age, regardless of our age, we have the right to have people in our lives who are going to support us no matter what. They're not falling for the false self, but they're falling for the person you really are. And they're doing it with unconditional love and acceptance. You deserve that. We all do. So, like, in conclusion, I end this episode with this. So, it's my hope that Elliot Page, my story, and the stories of older trans people and non-binary people who are looking for support realize that it's not too late to be and live as your authentic self, and that living your authentic self can help you heal those childhood wounds. Who you are today can actually help who you were. And and living a beautiful, healthy, vibrant, authentic life, fulfilling life is possible. It's possible. It's possible for older trans and non-binary people to live a normal, what they consider normal, authentic life. We have spouses, we have jobs, we have businesses, we go on vacations. You know what I mean? Like, we have dogs, we have cats. You know what I mean? Like, we have stories of our own, and we have an existence of our own. It's possible. It's very possible, and I'm living proof of that. And I'm not the only one. And like, and I say we can be a beacon of hope for the younger generation. We can be a beacon of hope. Us older trans and non-binary people, we can be a beacon of hope to those who are coming out, younger kids who are coming out or wishing to come out. So I don't know, like, if you remember me saying this, and I hope y'all kept a note of it, a mental note of it. Remember when I said that, um, when I was talking about like who I consider like an older trans and non-binary person, like a person living an established life before they transition and didn't have to rely on their loved ones financially or otherwise. I meant that shit. And the reason why I said that is because there are so many younger trans and non-binary people out there who feel that that's not possible, and that them even living that long is not possible. And they have to heavily, they're going to forever rely financially and emotionally on their parents. That they're forever, they feel trapped and feel like this is it. I'm here to tell you now that there are older trans and non-binary people who have their own homes, who have their own businesses, who have their own families, who don't have to heavily rely on people who are not here for them or don't try to understand them. You are not trapped because there's a way out. I want folks to know, especially the younger generation of trans and non-binary people who do not have support. You do not have to rely on your parents for long. You do not have to, emotionally put yourself at risk for long or ever. I'm telling you right now, like, I came out at like 37 years old. By this time, I'm living in New York State, have my own apartment, have my own money. And for me, that's freedom. My parents don't have any say so in what I do as far as my life choices. And that type of attitude and that type of reality is possible. And I'm here to show that. You don't have to be surrounded, you do not have to accept conditional love or love that's based on someone else's idea of who you really are. We can be an example of that, older trans and non-binary people. There are choices. And also, we like older individuals, like older trans and non-binary individuals, we also show that this is not a game. This is not a game. This is not a trend. This is not a fad. You are trans for the rest of your life. You're trans for life, and there's nothing wrong with that. You don't grow out of it. You don't snap out of it. This is it. This is it. And there's nothing wrong with it. And you can be emotionally and financially stable without family members, and friends who don't see you for who you are. You can definitely, and you are very much, I can't stress how much you deserve love and compassion and reciprocity. And you deserve to have a life that you envision for yourself, and older trans and non-conforming people can be seen as an example of that. that's why I said that older trans people are those, to me, are those who also have an established life where they're away from the parents, or they're not uh, relying on their parents for anything, because we are able to do, people who are able to do that are also able to survive this world, and they can be a beacon of hope for those who feel like being this particular support system that they have grown up with, especially those who have gone through trauma. This is it. Like this is it. I don't have another option. Family isn't always blood, and you are not alone. So I just wanted to let y'all know, like, it's so freeing. It's so freeing. And you can be out, you can come out at any age, any way you see fit, as long as you're able to be out somehow. And just know that there's hope out there um for older trans and non-binary people. We are out here, and there's hope. So that's all I have for this week. So if this episode resonates with you, please share, comment, and help me spread the word about the Inner Child Collective podcast. And leave a comment whenever or wherever you listen to this podcast. I would really love to hear what you have to say in regards to this episode and many others. You can also, again, follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. And if you're interested, because as I said before, I'm a psychic intuitive medium, and I'm also a storyteller. So if you're interested in getting an in-depth psychic reading or intuitive reading, or a personalized bedtime story, because I love doing that. I read bedtime stories every Wednesday at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, but I also read personalized bedtime stories and as a particular service. You can go to www.internalized.com to book an appointment, or to get a personalized bedtime story. I'll also be posting information I told you about, all those articles I told you about, in the descriptions below. I'm not joking. I'm not playing. The more we know about, older trans people, the better, because we are out here, and a lot of us are very willing and very able to support the younger generation and others, other older people who are wanting to come out, and to be their authentic selves. So, like, I'm here for it, and I'm here for y'all, and I love y'all. For those who are watching, I see you, and I hear you, and I love you unconditionally, because it's hard out here, right? But it's also very beautiful and very freeing. So thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate your time and your energy and your love and support. So thank you so much. And shout out to those who listen. Shout out to those who share and support this podcast. I really appreciate y'all. So till next time, peace. See you later.